Hello Thomas fans and welcome once again. So today I will be talking about all 26 episodes of Season 3 and ranking them from worst to best. As ever, this video is my opinion and my opinion only, so if your list is different to mine, which it probably will be on this occasion, good for you. Originally aired in 1991, this was the first series that had narration from Michael Angelis, who continued to narrate until Series 16. Season 3 also saw the introduction of multiple stories that were Brittlecroft and David Mitton's original ideas. Only half of this series featured stories that were written by Will Witawdry, who said that he disliked quite a few of these original episodes. But do we, the audience, share the same view? Let's find out, by starting with my least favourite episode. Number 26. Thomas Gets Bumped. It was fairly difficult for me to choose an episode for number 26, so forgive me if this is one of your favourites. This episode is quite simple really. Thomas has an accident and Bertie has to take his passengers. We get some fairly annoying scenes where Thomas is moping for losing his passengers even though he knows Bertie's his friend and he wouldn't do that to Thomas. Despite being one of the first episodes I ever saw, it's not a favourite of mine, but as I said before, it was a difficult choice. Number 25. One Good Turn. This was Bill and Ben's second episode with them as main characters, and after the Diesel and Wrong Road, we know that Bill and Ben are really cheeky characters who never stop playing tricks, but this one doesn't even talk about that. It's just Bill and Ben falling out over an incident with the turntable, and later they realise they do better when they work together. It's quite similar to what we get with several other twin characters in much later seasons, but we know Bill and Ben are better than that, so yeah, not one of their best episodes and nowhere near as good as the other episode involving them this series. Number 24. Edward, Trevor, and the Really Useful Party. In my video on the Season 2 episodes, I said how much of a basic character Trevor was, and like the others, this episode really emphasises too much on Trevor's interest in children. Bertie is once again being boastful even though he and Trevor are clearly separate individuals who do entirely different things. The bit where Bertie gets stuck, however, does prove Bertie wrong about Trevor, and that is fairly good to see, but other than that, this episode is very simple and still doesn't give Trevor any other personality traits, so my opinion on him isn't changed by this. Number 23. Thomas and Percy's Christmas Adventure. For some reason, the early Christmas episodes were all much too similar. I mean, if you're making a Christmas episode, at least make it different. All three were basically about the same thing, the engines clearing the snow with their snowplow just in time for Christmas. I think I prefer this one because they did at least film a Christmas morning scene and it looks very nice, but since we've seen this plot twice before, this episode isn't that interesting. Number 22. Thomas, Percy and the Post Train. The thing that makes this episode good is the nighttime scenes. The whole island at nightfall looks amazing and it reminds you so much of the Flying Kipper. Other than that, the plot is very basic. I don't get why Harold always wants to deliver the mail rather than help engines and people in trouble, a much more exciting and rewarding job. Also, why does Thomas have to take the post? I would have thought that he would be overworked by taking Annie and Clarabelle and doing this as well, but did he have to be included in this story? I don't think so. Other than that, the visuals look amazing, but that's really the only thing I particularly like about this one. Number 21. Time for Trouble. I would really like to know why they didn't use the original book title doubleheader. It makes more sense and tells you exactly what the episode's about. As for the episode itself, it's good to see Toby's more vulnerable side and that he's not always giving advice, he can get into precarious situations as well. Other than that, the plot's fairly basic. Although it's done again in You Can't Win, I think I prefer the second version. The first half of Gordon I don't think is that necessary, I think it just takes up too much time out of the episode. But still, it's great to see James get humiliated once again. Number 20. No Joke for James. The thing about Series 3 is there were a lot of episodes that were a sign of what was to come for the show. James tells lies so that he can benefit from them, then gets told off by the Fat Controller and then at the end resolves matters. It's so similar to future episodes and doesn't quite fit into what was the golden age of Thomas and Friends. Another episode I tend to skip. Number 19. Thomas, Percy and the Dragon. Another episode that talks about the occasional fallings out between Thomas and Percy, but this time they do it right. In the end, Thomas and Percy both learn lessons and the viewers can learn from this as well. Another thing I really like is the music and sound effects when Thomas is taking the dragon to the carnival. That was very cool to listen to. The scenes where Percy says he saw a dragon but no one believes him are quite dull but over with quite quickly. Once again, this episode has a nice message and it shows the great friendship Thomas and Percy have that continues to this day. Number 18. Mavis. Just like what I said with Daisy in Series 2, this episode is just a basic way to introduce Mavis and nothing more. As you know, Mavis is my favourite female character because she has quite a vicious streak in her and she's not one to be messed with. By the end of this episode, we know she's young, inexperienced, and does not like being beaten by the Trocks. Other than that, there's not a huge amount to say. A great way to get to know Mavis, but not as exciting and interesting as what came after. Number 17. All at Sea. In this episode, we see a side of Doc that hadn't been established prior to this, his imaginative side. Up to now, we know he is smart and is always eager to bend the rules, and that's it. This time, we know that Doc is interested in sailing and going beyond Sodor, and that he does use his heart as well as his head. I do like the way in which Duck realises that he is better off on the rails when he helps the sailor get to hospital. Also, the message that Michael Angelis gives at the end of the episode I find is very touching and very true as well.
Duck still wonders about the lands beyond the horizon, but he enjoys being with friends most of all, and I think he knows that sometimes the best travels are those we can only dream about. Don't you?
Number 16. Trust Thomas. If it wasn't for the cool crash, this probably would be much lower. Gordon encourages James to pretend to be ill, so Thomas takes his drop for him. As I said in the Series 2 video, I hope that Thomas would be nicer in this series, and he certainly is in this episode. He very kindly helps his friend James when he is quote-unquote ill, and he helps ensure that Bertie's road is repaired. This one changed my opinion of Thomas quite a bit, so that's why I enjoy it more than the previous episodes. Number 15. Percy, James and the Fruitful Day. A fairly silly episode in some places, but still really quite likeable. The argument between Percy and James does start off in a very simple way. The first half is quite dull. I do quite like the crash that Percy has and the scene where he is covered in the fruit. But the one thing that makes this episode for me is the message from Thomas at the end. The fact that it's Thomas that makes this point to the much bigger engines allows us to have more respect for the character, and I wish that we had more stories about this. The point he makes is one we can all relate to, and I'm glad that they end the episode on that note.
You know, he said to no engine in particular, there's more than one way to get jammed. We all learned that today. Still there was silence. What's more, continued Thomas, we also learned that sometimes when engines help each other out of a jam, things can still go wrong. So, said a voice. So, finished Thomas, that means we learned a lot today, and therefore then came a chorus. We're really useful engines after all.
Number 14. Donald's Duck. Not as exciting as other episodes in this series, but still nice. Up to now, Donald and Douglas were never seen separately. This episode showed that the two twins do have good character, even when they're separate from each other. We get to see Donald's caring side for Dilly the duck, but also we get to see both his and Duck's cheeky comedic side. When they both try to outdo each other, it is quite funny, and once again, it is nice to see Donald show a great attachment to this little duck. And this does show that just because you have a twin brother, doesn't mean you have to be together every second of the day. Number 13. The Trouble with Mud. I did say this was number 1 on the video I did about a year ago, but now that I know why some people don't like it that much, it has slipped down the list quite a bit. It is really two stories mixed into one that don't really fit that well. I don't know why Gordon isn't interested in being washed at first, considering in future episodes he would have undoubtedly said his catchphrase and would have demanded to be cleaned straight away. The second half is better though, because Gordon has learnt his lesson now, and it shows that he is willing to help James, who did partly insult him earlier. Just like the other stories in Gordon the Big Engine book, we do get to see some sides to Gordon that we very rarely see. And that's why I like this episode so much, but if it wasn't for the first half, this would definitely be in with a shout of being number 1 in this list. Number 12. Bulgy. Bulgy is another great villain for this series who is desperate for the railways to close, to the point where he would even steal the engine's passengers. I'm glad they had Duck as the one who stands up to Bulgy because of his common sense, but the best part of this episode is the scene where Bulgy is stuck under the bridge. It is so funny, and to see him terrified of the bridge falling on him always makes me crack a smile at least. Number 11. A Scarf for Percy. While the original story, Percy and the Trousers, is very short and quite silly, they definitely improved it when making this episode. They explain why Percy wants a scarf so much, and it properly explains how Percy's learnt his lesson. The crash looks very spectacular, especially in slow motion. The island looks great when covered in snow. Well, where doesn't it? Other than that, just a fun, memorable episode that has another of Percy's great incidents. Number 10. Tender Engines. While this one will never be as good as having Flying Scotsman actually talk like in the book, I am still very fond of this episode. Although they don't actually explain why Diesel is still on Sodor, the scene where he tells Gordon about the Diesels does explain the scene later very well. Also, the ending where Duck plays his trick on Henry is very funny, even if my favourite character is being made fun of. Number 9. Buzz Buzz. Another rather silly but still fun episode. The first few scenes where James is being rude to Boko are just James being James. Nothing that interesting, but when the beehive is knocked over, I do like how overdramatic it is at times. When everyone runs out of the station rather than try and guide them away, it reminds me of the Michael McIntyre sketch on the bees and wasps, and those passengers are definitely the total panickers. As for the animation for the bees, well, let's just say that the current CGI looks better than this. I know it was the 90s, but still. Did you have to spend all that money drawing that rather unusual looking bee? But as I said before, this episode you could afford to miss if you want to follow the show as more of a narrative, but if you want a one-off fun episode, then you'll certainly get it with Buzz Buzz. Number 8. Toby's Tightrope. In this episode we were still getting to know Mavis, and through this we could learn that she can be overbearing at times. The fact that she asked the trucks to give Toby a hard time does show that she is not a helpless female character. She can cross the line as well. But the thing I love the most about this one is how dramatic they made the scene where part of the bridge collapsed, and Toby is just about staying on top of it. It is very intense, and when Mavis saves him, this again gives her character and proves that she can be a hero. Number 7. Diesel does it again. If I know Thomas and Friends, they would never let a character permanently leave the show, even if they've caused trouble left, right and centre. Diesel is the perfect example. The chaos he causes in this one shows he's not just a creepy, lying character, he's a creepy, lying, bullying, health hazard character. Again, if it wasn't for Diesel 10 and maybe Sailor John, Diesel would be the perfect villain for the series. But anyway, it's good that Percy and Duck do tell the Fat Control about Diesel, because that is what all children should do when being bullied. So this episode doesn't just show a more troublesome side to Diesel, it is educational as well, and it should have a lot of respect because of that. Number 6. Gordon and the Famous Visitor. I'm sure none of you are surprised this one was high on the list, because you know how much I love some of Gordon's episodes where he gets his just desserts. I think it would have been better if they let City of Truro have more of a speaking role like in the original book, but other than that, this episode is almost exactly the same as Dober's Engines, a story I am very fond of. I imagine they would have made a large-scale version of Gordon for the close-ups of the dome, and it does look very detailed. We do get a nice new version of Gordon's theme, my favourite character theme, and the end line is a very funny and ironic way to end the episode.
"Never trust domeless engines," said a voice from somewhere behind him. "They aren't respectable."
Number 5. Heroes. This one is rarely talked about in terms of good episodes, and I can't see why. For me, this is in the top 3 of the best Burn Ben episodes, because they're still cheeky and they're still inexperienced in this one, but also they fancy a change and a surprise. The scene with the rock slide is for me one of the most dramatic scenes in all of Thomas, even though it's only in season 3. It's as if David Bitton told the other people handling the trains to destroy the entire quarry set in a certain amount of time and film it as well. It looks so spectacular that this episode has to be high on my list. Number 4. Percy's Promise. Although we rarely see it, unfortunately, when Sodor gets some unusual weather, the visual effects department never disappoints. In Percy's Promise, the island covered in puddles looks amazing. I would like to know what they used to make the rain in this episode, it looks so convincing. It's great to see Percy finally show some determination to help Thomas, as we hadn't seen this from him yet. Another visually amazing episode, and it shows that we have another great hero in this show. Number 3. Oliver Owns Up. After only briefly getting to know Oliver in Escape, we get a much better introduction to him in Oliver Owns Up. The accent he has is a very unusual one and a very cool one as well. At the end of this episode, we know that Oliver is a very proud engine who does take a lot of praise from his friends, but also he doesn't take failure very well. So we already know that Oliver is a unique character, and we should open our hearts for him. Number 2. Henry's Forest. Oh, who cares what Wilbur Tawdry said about Henry's Forest? This episode is wonderful. We hadn't had an episode about Henry since Whistles and Sneezes, so we didn't know if there was anything else that Henry liked or did, until this masterpiece came out. Yes, that is what I would call it. We see Henry at his most sensitive point when past the forest is destroyed, and you feel incredible sympathy for it, because who could blame him? They made the forest look beautiful in this one. This episode is another reminder of how talented the visual effects people were, and also how much heart the writers and directors put into a lot of their episodes. I will never understand why some people hate this episode. At number 1, Escape. If Donald's Duck allowed Donald to show his caring side, Escape allowed Douglas to show his brave, determined side. And I think this is why I like Douglas a little bit more than his brother. If I could describe Escape with one word, I would call it triumphant. Edward is once again the voice of reason and tells Douglas how important Trevor is. Later, on the other railway, Douglas finds Oliver and without hesitation agrees to save him from a scrap, and that tells us a lot about the Scottish twins. The music where Douglas rescues Oliver is incredibly triumphant, and definitely matches the Race Against Time storyline. The Fat Patrol also shows his generous side when he agrees to let Oliver work on Duck's branch line, showing that he doesn't just tell the engines off when they've done wrong, he does care greatly about his engines, new and old. I cannot think of one thing wrong with this episode. It's exciting, heroic, and one of the best of all time. So, what's my opinion on Series 3? Well, I do stick to my opinion that it is joint third with Series 2. Despite there being a few more bad episodes in Series 2, I really can't say which one I prefer out of these two. But they are not a match for the season I will be talking about next, Series 4. So, what do you guys think? Is your list different to mine, and what's your opinion on Series 3? Let me know down in the comments. As always, thanks for watching, and until next time, sparkle, sparkle, sparkle.